going to go right into the program and begin our first panel session of the day. I think we've given everyone who is in here a bit of grace. Um, so our first panel session today would be centered on the topic Nigerian energy transition strategy, climate action versus energy security. And for this panel, the moderator of this panel is Irene David Arinze. She is the founder and CEO of Leader Network. Can we give her a round of applause, please, as she makes her way to the podium? Also on the panel is Jumoke Delano. She's the managing consultant of CBI Energy Consulting Limited. Can we give her a round of applause as well, please? Thank you. Then we have Geoffrey Omedo, Dr. Geoffrey Omedo, who is the Knowledge and Community Manager for Sustainable Energy with the UNDP Sustainable Energy Hub. Can we give him a round of applause as he makes his way to the podium? And finally, we have Wangari Mushiri, who is currently being engaged. We met her earlier. She is the Africa Director for the Global Wind Energy Council and Renewable Energy Alliance. So she would be joining the panel once she's done with her engagement. But please, can we give our panelists a round of applause as they begin on with the topic? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eloho, for that. And welcome everyone. As earlier introduced, my name is Irene David Arinze. I'm the founder of Leader Network. Thank you so much to my panelists. So I will also wait for Wangari if she's going to make it. And today we'll be talking about something very important: Nigeria's energy transition strategy, climate action versus energy security. It's not a fight, it's a conversation typically, and let's see how we can bridge this gap. And today's conversation would be moving us from the ease of market entry and supply of renewable energy technologies to conversations about financing reforms and renewable energy integration. While it is commendable that action plans and initiatives are being put in place to ensure Nigeria's clean energy transition, it is imperative to consider the economic climate that makes or mars this development. We see rural electrification support across the country, and these are concerns that the general approach may, and there are concerns that the general approach may focus on climate action initiatives rather than catering to the energy gaps by enforcing the productive use of energy to support things like farming, education, and providing electricity access to unserved and underserved communities, renewable energy integration as a means of achieving this. So we'll be talking about all of this today. And I hope to really get your thoughts. Madam Jumoke, thank you so much for joining us here, and Mr. Geoffrey as well. And I hope we would have a very, very interesting conversation today. Now we know that, I would like to start with you, Madam Jumoke. We know that, we have quite a number of energy programs happening in the country. We have the NEP program, the Nigeria Electrification Program, we have the DES program, and then there's one NSI, and quite a number of them really. What are your views on Nigeria's clean energy project development approach? Would you say it's effective and able to really get us to a point of this energy transition that we want to get to as a people?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. This is an interesting question you've asked on the clean energy approach and the climate change, project development. That's one of the buzzwords, now, climate change. How do we develop sustainable projects. And I must say that Nigeria has been very active on that fora by, even from the international levels, the treaties, Nigeria becoming a member of the UN Convention on the framework for climate change. So there's the work that has been done at international level, Paris Agreement and co. Then at national level, there are quite a number of policies, just as you've mentioned. There are so many of them actually, and you've mentioned, some of them. So these policies, are there. The Nigerian electrification project. There's the national policy on climate change, even as far back as I think 2012. So there's a lot that has been done. But there is a process, for when you have a policy, how do you enforce that policy? Because a policy of itself is not enforceable. You need to develop a framework that allows, creates a legal backing for the ideas that you've put inside that policy. And so that's why even with the policy on climate change, subsequently came the Climate Change Act. We also have the Electricity Act, recently. So this has put, legal backing and framework around the ideas, because you use the laws to give flesh to the ideas of the policy so that there's a legal framework within which to operate. And now we're seeing also with the decentralization that has taken place in the electricity markets, we are seeing states also begin to develop their own policies. So I would say that nothing is perfect. So everything, there's always room for improvement. You never get to the point where you say, it's done, it's perfect, we are in El Dorado. No, there's always room for improvement. But Nigeria has done quite a bit, and we see it getting closer and closer to the grassroots. Because as I mentioned, even Lagos State has an electricity policy. If you look at that electricity policy, it's a subnational government, it's not at national level. It has a lot, copious references to renewable energy. So it's not perfect, but we have many of the right pieces. So that I would say that Nigeria has made significant progress. Is there room for improvement? Certainly, but a lot of important pieces have been put in place. Yeah,
thank you very much for that, Jumoke. I like that you also mentioned all of the different things that are happening across different states, Lagos, for example, and how they are literally taking it by the horn and saying, you know what, for our states, this is what we're going to do to ensure that level of energy penetration and access for those that are unserved. And I'd like to come to you, Mr. Geoffrey, at this point. Working with the UNDP, I know that you're doing and trying to roll out a couple of very interesting things when it comes to the renewable energy space. Do you think that the relevant implementing agencies have developed very practical and actionable strategies to facilitate the plans for implementation?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity and being here. And I think this is a very interesting conversation. Within UNDP, we do not see a very big difference on the question on climate action and also energy access and energy transition. In fact, these are inextricably linked together. And I can just give a small example that I think my colleague Wangari can be able to reinforce later. The first time, I'm a Kenyan myself, although I have been adopted and now I'm called Emeka, an Igbo here. And I enjoy a lot the egusi soup. But I'm struggling, like my sister here, to get the pidgin. But I think it's starting to come in now. But in 1998, we had the El Nino phenomenon, the El Nino La Nina phenomenon in Kenya that set us on made us have very serious conversation on the question of energy. Because immediately after the El Nino, we went into the La Nina, where our dams dried. We have the Seven Fork scheme, which is our main source of energy. It dried. The levels went so low, the generating company had to basically shut down the system. So we were now staring at a real challenge of not having electricity. So what did the government do then? It negotiated for the thermal generators to come into the country. That's the first time we got thermal generation to come into the country. And from 1999 to date, they have never left. But the government now started putting in place strategic measures to see how they can phase out the thermal generation. And the government has a very ambitious plan to ensure that by 2030, all the thermal generation systems will have been retired. So immediately, the focus went on to how do we get a robust energy mix? Because the solution is not to over-focus on one and leave the other. Because in the long term, all these systems are actually interlinked, and climate is a major, major driver to all of this. For example, hydro is linked to the rainfall patterns, right? Wind, as we were told by Wangari, is also linked to the same. Solar irradiance is also linked to the weather climates, and the changing climates are actually making solar irradiance increase. So having a robust energy mix is a very, very critical climate action, but also energy action response. So from UNDP's perspective, we see the interlinkages of this whole system. And that's why I believe that looking at some of the strategies that Nigeria is putting in place, you are on the right path. For instance, we are really, really glad and just hearing the Minister of Power speak about the Vision 30-30-30. That is getting 30 gigawatt from renewables by the year 2030 and considerably increasing the renewables in your energy mix to 30% by the year 2050. That will be a major, major, major achievement. And that's what we'll be able to bring in systems like the wind system, the solar system, to strengthen your hydro systems so that you can be able to reach to a level where we have managed to do in Kenya, where we have, I think, above 90% of our electricity grid being green. It's renewable, 90%. But if you compare to Nigeria, 86% is not green, 14% is from hydro, and I think less than 5% is coming from renewables. So the best way to be able to respond to your question is to ensure that climate and energy are not separated. They are all intertwined, they are all interlinked, but ensure that you grow all the various energy systems to effectively be able to get a healthy and robust energy mix, which will be able to ensure that your grid will be stable and you can be able to go into the productive use in that regard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geoffrey, for really emphasizing the variable renewable energy sources and how everything's really intertwined. And more importantly, the fact that we really can't isolate one and then talk about the other, talking about renewable energy sources and then isolating climate, because they all really impact on each other. You know, you were talking about how rainfall, when it comes to hydro, it's really linked with the volume of rainfall that we see, right? And then I'd like to come to our Kenyan sister who we have adopted in Nigeria, Wangari. Thank you so much for joining us on this session. You have assessed Nigeria's energy sector, visited us quite a number of times this year alone, and joined some institutions to introduce the Wind Energy Council for Nigeria here. How would you rate Nigeria's approach to the clean energy development?
Great, thank you so much, and it's great to see you, Irene. Great to be on the panel with friends and new friends as well. So thank you, and my apologies for being late. I've been caught between meetings today. I think you're right. The reason I keep coming back to Nigeria, I think this is my 5th or 6th trip this year, because the potential for Nigeria, once we're able to crack the power system to provide electricity that is reliable to every citizen here, there's no market, there's no developer, manufacturer, financier who will not be looking at Nigeria. And when you go outside, when you go to COP, you go to the UN General Assembly, the conversation about what the potential is for Nigeria is there, right? But people don't know what to do, and people don't know how to do it. And we've seen a lot. I think you already touched on the 30-30-30. There's already a lot of changes within the actual policy with the new electricity Act coming in. And it has been really significant, especially this year, because states are now able to procure their own electricity or energy. So what does that do? That means that if I'm Cross River State or if I'm Benue State, or if I'm Plateau State, and the national focus is on oil and gas, but I know that I think we had somebody here say, in my state, there's plenty of wind. And I know that I have that wind. How can we be attractive to investors who want to come and invest, bring the technology, and use that to benefit my people? And so one of the things that I've seen recently is even when we were at the pavilion, Nigeria had a pavilion at COP28 last year in Dubai, the conversation around governors coming to look for investment and sign MOUs with people like us, the Global Wind Energy Council, to say, I have wind, I just don't know where to start, has been significant. Not just one or two people. I think we had 7 states ask us. And actually, as a result of that, I don't know where the NWEC team is, we're now doing road shows to each state. I think they've gone to Katsina State as the first one. They went to Benue, and they're also going to go, is it Kaduna? What's the other state they're going to? And Plateau actually has a lot of wind, so we're en route. So, and how do we come and just teach people within the sector around how to explore their wind, how to develop these projects, where financing comes from? When we come with these roadshows, can African Development Bank be there? Can the people who provide batteries be there? The people who will upgrade grids, can they also join us? So that this conversation is a holistic conversation around how energy can really be produced from the inherent resources that we all have. So I've seen this opportunity in Nigeria, as you all have, which is why you're here. But I think now we need to, it's not enough to say Plateau has plenty of wind. It's not enough to say it. Why are the turbines not in the ground? And when you look at why the turbines are not, it's not the policy, because the Energy Act now allows for local procurement. It's a matter of bringing everybody around the same table and having that important conversation. And if we can do that, I mean, thank you for inviting us to Plateau. If we can do that to all the states, then I think that.
All right, thank you, Wangari, for making a business case for us. And I mean, while you were speaking, it was more of for each state to start to think about the commercial viability of whatever resources that they have per state. Plateau is already inviting us, and I hope that Jewel comes and does their thing. And it's really important because it sort of helps us start to think beyond just the resources. Fine, we have the resources, but then how can we then harness it into productive use for our people?
Actually, there's a concept, and I don't know if you've already discussed this in this conference, but there's a concept around green industrialization. Now, when we talk about renewable energy, when we talk about energy, we're not talking about the electrons. I'm not talking about how many electrons can power my phone. I'm talking about, can I create green fertilizer to grow food from this energy source that I have so that I can sell food abroad or feed my people, right? Can I pump water with a wind farm to be able to irrigate arable land? Can I create green hydrogen that can go in and make another output, such as green steel, that I can sell to Europe to earn forex income? So the conversation now is not really just around renewable energy. Now, when you think about it on a state level, if Plateau states can use its excessive wind to sell green steel to the EU, they'll be more competitive than South Africa. One of South Africa's biggest exports to the EU is steel. If Plateau State is able to use that and say, my income will be coming from steel making, that's a big opportunity. And so we also now need to start talking this conversation to our governors, our policymakers, our financiers, the consultants like Erabo. Thank you. I saw your presentation earlier. This is how we need to start shaping the conversation. It's not just about energy. It's about the opportunity for earning income and then using that to, pay for education, pay for food, pay for healthcare, and the rest.
All right. Thank you very much for expanding more on that. I'll come to you, Jumoke, regarding this same conversation that we're having and starting to think about how we can find that fine intersectionality between the climate challenges that we're having and while we're trying to solve them, also ensuring that energy access for all is actualized, particularly sort of tying in all that we have said. Geoffrey has said we do have the potential. We do have, our Energy Act. So in terms of policies, we seem to even be getting it right, this time. Wangari is also making a business case for us. But now in terms of implementation, right? How do you see that? How should we begin to think and implement?
Okay, thank you for that. I wanted to also mention the integrated resource plan, because one of the things that I think has come up in this discussion is how efficient, can you be? An integrated resource plan is a planning tool, that allows a utility, a state, a country to determine how to address its energy needs. How we have this goal of energy security, and the goal alongside of energy transition. The thing with an integrated resource plan is it allows you to do a projection for your energy demand, to identify the different sources of energy that you have. And of course, you cannot develop an integrated resource plan without talking about the renewable sources. Nigeria, UK NIAF is working with Nigeria currently to develop a national integrated resource plan. That the first iteration is almost completed and will be submitted to the Honorable Minister of Power. Now, that integrated resource plan fits in to the Nigerian Integrated Energy Policy and Strategic Implementation Plan. So, because no more should we work in silos, there must be a cohesion to all these activities that are being undertaken. So, that National Integrated Resource Plan also has the feature that allows states to pull data and also push. So while it was developed centrally, there is, and it's a dynamic document, that keeps on being updated as needs change, resources are discovered. It's also a least cost plan, so that you look at the revenue, the sources of energy that you have. Is it more cost effective for me to develop wind or to develop solar, or hydro? So when you're developing a least cost plan, it takes into consideration your energy demands, the forecast of what the demand is now, what it will be in the future, what are the resources available, which is the best one, what are the networks that are required to deliver that energy. So that is one of the things that I think is a plus for Nigeria. And as the states, begin the process of decentralization, about maybe 7 or more states now getting approval from NERC to develop their own state electricity markets. They are likely, it is advisable for any state developing a state electricity market to develop its own integrated resource plan. So there must be a balance, because from the states are concerned. I mean, rural communities, we are interested in energy security. That's the one that is our primary focus now. It's not energy transition, yes, but we are more focused on, we don't have power. We need power for industrialization. So there must be, it is important that there is a balance, that even when things are being developed at the center, the input from the subnationals must be taken into consideration. So that is very key. Meanwhile, that's not to say that with the policies and the laws being developed at the center, at least before the amendment of the Electricity Act, energy was regulated, at the center. So you can understand why, there may be a divergence of views that, the center is focused on climate action. But as the states begin to take their destinies into their own hands, I see that it will be easier to balance, these two options of both energy security and also climate action. So it is important that states, begin to engage with the center in the development, of these laws.
Actually, I wanted to also back up what Jumoke said. I think, Jumoke, you're very right? The conversation of renewable energy in Africa is not about climate change. We've not been polluting. We've only contributed 4%. So how can you say decarbonize? That's not really our conversation. But on the flip side, there's a lot of funding going into this. There's a lot of technology. So how do we use that to benefit us? We don't have to deconstruct all these coal power plants in many African countries. We don't have to worry about established grids and systems. We're starting from scratch. It might be a curse, it might be a blessing, right? but let's use that to be steps ahead of everybody else who still has to uncover and deconstruct all the other systems. So it's definitely, you're right, it's not climate change, it's about development.
Let me also
No,
add,
no, no.
Let me
I
also
want to
add
disagree
something.
with them on that.
1 minute, Jeffrey. 1 minute, Jeffrey. So
Okay.
what I wanted to add is, even though these policies or laws have been developed at the center, we see, for example, the Nigerian electrification project, which has benefited many states. Now, the scale is not where it should be, certainly. Is there room for improvement? With 95 million people not having access to electricity, certainly. But those national projects have somehow found a way, to benefit the unserved and underserved in the rural and the local communities. We have the current $750 million World Bank DS project is also something that was signed at the center, but has the focus of delivering to rural, communities also. But there is room for improvement. But just to mention some of the things that are currently ongoing.
All right, thank you. Mr. Geoffrey, 1 second before, if you could just hold your thoughts for a bit so that we also don't lose the line of, yes. So I'll come to you, Mr. Geoffrey, and then you can also add your comments regarding what Jumoke and Wangari have said. In terms of, as a development agency, right, how would you measure Nigeria's approach to tackling this energy poverty that we're speaking about before we come to Wangari, and she sort of shares with us what Nairobi is doing, how you're able to also alleviate your people from poverty while ensuring that there's energy access? Because energy is the lifeblood of any economy. If we're talking about industrialization, green industrialization, we need energy access to get from point A to point B. So I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And let me just use that question to just give a bit of statistics, because the data also is speaking on the conversation between energy access vis-a-vis energy transition. Just today, I've learned that Banex, I've just learned from engineer from next year, that Banex has around 900 shops with around 700 gensets that are powered by diesel and oil. And this is a situation that is replicated across the whole of Nigeria. You have a generating capacity of 14.5 gigawatts. You transmit 7.5 gigawatts only, but 4.5 is what actually reaches the consumer. But do you know what everyone else is using to plug the gap? Very, very modest estimates are putting the power that's coming from the gensets to be around 60 gigawatts, which means the largest source of energy could actually be from the gensets. That therein is an opportunity for a transition. And that's why we are seeing, as I think Arabokon had mentioned, solar is starting to quickly plug that genset issue. And it's growing very naturally because people are now seeing that my neighbor has bought a solar power and it's effectively replacing my genset. So that energy transition conversation is going on as we speak. Everyone is seeing it. People who used to doubt solar are now being able to see that my neighbor has bought a solar panel and they have retired the genset. So yes, we have an energy access challenge. And I know we need to resolve that energy access challenge of 90 million people that don't have power. But we still have a huge energy transition challenge to retire permanently the over 25 million gensets that are all over Nigeria. And I think this data is also not very, very accurate. It could be very, very modest. I'm not giving very, very accurate data here. But I think all of us know that the reality of this is something that could actually be dealt with. Now, let me now plug into what we really need to do, because I think that's a very, very important point. We are really glad, and UNDP was one of the partners that has just been working with the government to put in place, to develop the National Integrated Electricity Policy that will formally put the Electricity Act into action. And we'll also be working with the ministry and the government to develop the strategic implementation plan. And we are really, really glad that this has been a process that has been very consultative. But we also need to reflect on what is the implication of having 37 new markets operating in the same space. Is that going to actually lead to energy access, or will it create some problems? We are really glad that states like Enugu have already taken the first step, and many other states are quickly trying to put in place markets. But we anticipate that there will be need for policy dialogue so that we can be able to deal with some of the challenges that might arise, challenging the standards that will be needed, pricing. Investors need to come and they need to be guided so that they can be able to also give the very best investment to the states that are needed. So there's an opportunity for policy dialogue coherence, and UNDP is putting in place a mechanism to support the states and the federal government to effectively be able to navigate this very, very interesting pathway. The second area that will be required is the area of data and digital. So we've just worked around designing a data and digital transformation opportunity, because this gives us a lot of opportunities to digitize some of these new markets that are coming in, and therefore reduce the inefficiencies that are in the current system. If you can be able to digitize it out front when you're starting it out, you'll be able to effectively have a lot of savings, not just in usage, but also the leakages will not be able to exist. Thirdly, and most importantly, the human capital that is required to meet the huge energy access and energy transition challenge for Nigeria. So UNDP is working right now on a human capital development plan to effectively ensure that the right skill sets, and this will also involve upskilling and reskilling the existing labor market to effectively be able to resolve the needs that are going to emerge. We see this not as a conversation of one losing, another winning. It's a win-win situation for Nigeria to aggressively pursue energy access, but also in the same measure pursue energy transition. And there will be opportunities on the climate side, perhaps when we discuss about some of the financing opportunities that this can be able to unlock in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much for that. I'll come to Wangari for key learnings. Perhaps one or two things we can pick from Nairobi. And I say this because, last time I saw it was in Nairobi, right? And we actually paid a visit to Kengen. And I see that there's like that mix. Even though the geothermal plant has a higher percentage of power generation for the country, they do have other energy sources, right? But what are those key learnings that we can take from what you currently have ongoing in Nairobi, perhaps, that can work for us here in Nigeria, given the fact that you do have a good understanding of what we are currently facing here as a country with respect to our energy needs?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, Irene. When we come to learnings from Kenya, one of the things that we've seen is most important is that we have a robust energy mix. So we don't rely on just one thing. 45% of our grid is geothermal, 15% is wind, 5% is solar. We also have hydropower that's also 15%. So it all comes to, you add, I think, 6% of heavy fuel oil, that comes to 100%. So what we've seen is that when hydro is down, so I think when I was presenting before, I spoke about droughts. When the hydro is down, the wind and geothermal have picked up. When the geothermal has an issue, wind and solar have picked up. So for us to really have a robust energy mix and something that we can say the grid is stable, right? Because we do have, consistent power, apart from here and there, maybe when you're on the edges of the grid where you might have a blackout. Kenya typically has very good stable power. And it's because of the mix of the different technologies. Now, the learnings that we've seen, and even in countries like South Africa, which have multiples of our grid in Kenya, the issue is when you are so dependent on one type of technology, the challenges that come with it, then you're also susceptible to those. And so one of the things that is very important is to determine, okay, and I think you talked about the integrated resource plan, what's the cheapest, quickest energy that I can get onto the grid? And then in addition to that, how do I multiply that across the country so that I can have it in different areas? Or how do I decentralize it? And then from there, how do I have a very smart operating system to say, let me be able to pick cheap wind when the wind is blowing at night, cheap solar when the sun is shining during the day, hydro when the dams are full, right? And you get the lowest levelized cost of electricity that way. So that learning and that learning of the different robust energy mix only came because we took a risk on some of the technologies. To give you an idea, in Kenya, we developed the Geothermal Development Company, which was the company responsible for exploring geothermal. So it took all the risk from independent power producers or from KenGen, who you met. KenGen is our generation company, and said, don't worry, you don't have to worry about the risk of drilling and looking for geothermal. We'll do that. We are on the government balance sheet. We will take that for you, so that when we find the well, you can take it and generate. With the wind, we had people come in and do the resource assessments. And actually, this is one of the things at NWEC we're trying to do. If we're able to do an upfront assessment that proves the wind in places like Plateau, places like Katsina, and shows that these are the wind speeds, this is how much power we can generate at, this is the cost we can generate at, then the story you tell investors is much easier, because you're benchmarking at a global standard. You're talking at World Bank level, right? And so the learning from that is we also need to learn to take that risk up front, right? And it's difficult. I know most people say, but where's the money, right? There's a lot of money once you're able to say, this is what I really want to do. And I think one of the reasons Enugu State and some of these other states that have gone ahead is because they're able to put together a plan that tells the story of the state. Then the investors come and say, okay, we know what you want to do. Here's money, here's technology, let's go from there. So in terms of the learnings, I think the robust energy mix. Now, in addition to that, and touching on what you spoke on about workforce, a lot of the workforce that we have in Kenya who are experts on wind, experts on geothermal, on solar, only came about because of the systems we already have in place. We're not like China. China has 1,000 engineers for every one engineer we have in Africa, renewables. So we're not like that. That did not just come like that. We had to slowly build that over time. And now we have universities that have renewable energy engineering degrees as a result of our energy mix, not the other way around. And so, it's great to have the UNDPs doing this workforce development, because that did not exist the day when Kenya was developing its energy system. But now that we have both going, the workforce work plans that are being done by people like UNDP, but also states being able to say, this is our focus, we're going to now develop these energy systems, that inherent capability will start to be built. Then the workforce will come, the investment will come, the technology will follow, the manufacturing will follow. And I think...
Thank you so much. And while you were speaking about, the energy mix, my mind just quickly went back to when we say that there's the national grid collapse here in Nigeria, and then there's that total blackout. But then if we start to harness these other options of energy solutions, right, we possibly would not have to experience a total blackout situation as we've had in the past. And so I think it's important that we now start to talk about the financing, the investment, what we need to do to start to attract that level of investment. Wangari already sort of touched on it, but I'll come to you, Jumoke, as key stakeholders, right? And then government and policies, what do you think we can start to do to attract the kind of investment that will support our diversified energy mix?
Okay, good question. The interesting thing is that if you even look at the current Electricity Act, looking at it from the national level, there is a lot of information there, or provisions that have to do with investments. Investments in transmission, investments in generation, willing buyer, willing seller, type of structures. So at the national level, you already have ample provisions that speak to, attracting investment. And then from the laws, you now have the regulations. There's what is called the mini grid regulation. And I'm told, even from colleagues at ERERA, that the mini grid regulations for Nigeria are very, very good, and are touted as being one of the best mini grid regulations. And it's on the basis of those regulations that you see the investments in isolated mini grids, interconnected mini grids have taken place. So at the central level, there is quite a bit. There's franchising, there's embedded generation, those regulations. And I think the interest for an investor who is coming into Nigeria to invest, they want to make sure that, how does my money that I'm bringing in, how does it come out? So the frameworks, there that allow investments to come in and also to go out. So looking at the enabling environment, it's important that sanctity of contracts continue to be important, and that the framework for dispute resolution is also one that does not require you to know the judge, or incentivize the judge before he can deliver justice. So that's at the national level. As states also begin to create their electricity markets, that is also another important thing in creating your policy that now devolves, that you now give flesh to in your law. Have you made it possible for any investor who is looking at that document to say, oh, this is a document that enables me to develop something that is bankable? So, because bankability is very important. So you develop your policy, you develop the law, then you develop the regulations. For me, as states start to develop their own state electricity markets, there are some things that are critical for them. For me, I would recommend that ring fencing structures, things that, frameworks that allow the acceleration of investments into your state are key. So even a mini grid regulation in a state that has just created its electricity market is key, because as Wangere said, she said, funds are following, renewable energy projects. So you must set up your state with a framework that allows, these funds to be attracted. I don't know, in science, they call it, is it magnets? They have the north and the south poles. So they must be attracted. You must set up your state in a way that allows for investments in mini grids using renewable energy sources. So that is, for me, that's one of the quick wins that any state that is going to develop an electricity market should do. Because the projects they are shorter in terms of gestation. It's a shorter project time frame. Then things like franchising, independent electricity distribution networks, independent electricity transmission networks. You mentioned the grid. Yes, because one of the challenges, even with renewable, is the grid in a state to be able for you to integrate renewables into it. That is a problem. But states must develop frameworks that insulate them, because you are coming into your state's electricity market knowing about the problems that already exist. So in your market design, you must prepare to develop some insulation from the problems that are being faced, with the national grid. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Moke, for that. I'll come to you, Godfrey. And I'd like to sort of hear what the UNDP in Nigeria is doing with respect to also helping us get towards that point of energy security, right? And typically from state to state, really, what have you seen? You also talked about data and digital. Let's also sort of hear if there's anything that UNDP is doing with either the government or developers or individuals, organizations, just to sort of help us start to think through solutions now. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is a very important question, the question of financing. If we analyze what's happening globally, currently we realize that investments in the clean tech revolution are growing all over the world, but last year they fell only in Africa. I think in Africa we had 47% reduction in investments on clean tech, while globally investments in clean tech are actually rising. Africa last year only got 62 gigawatts added from renewables. China had close to 2,000 gigawatts added from clean tech. Approximately 2,000 added, and all over. That's the picture. So you ask yourself, why is it that the continent that needs energy most has the least investment? Number one. How come the continent that bestrides the equator, very, very centrally? I think God really intended for Africa to bestride the equator for these reasons. It means you have very good solar irradiance, as was demonstrated in the morning. Why is it that we're seeing the least investment in solar technologies in Africa? But you know what? According to the data, Africa is still the only continent that's still investing in hydroelectric projects. These are expensive, and they take close to 5 years to put up. And as we have seen with climate change, they are also not very, very stable. Right now in the southern parts of Africa, most of the rivers have run dry. And right now, if you go to Zambia, the falls are no longer there because of the challenges of climate change. We're just coming out of the El Nino season right now, and there's a high likelihood that next year we'll have La Nina, which will bring depressed rainfalls across. And so we really need to start asking ourselves whether we are making the right investment. But now let me speak to your question and perhaps provide a bit of insights on why we are seeing these trends. Number one, the energy conversation is an investment conversation. So we really need to start talking the investment language as fast as possible. We need to move away from the grant language to the business language. We need to invest in pipeline developments. All these projects that we've been discussing in this room from morning to evening are very viable, bankable projects, but we've not put them ahead as investment opportunities. So we need the right skill sets to convert these wind ideas that my sister Wangari is talking about into bankable investment projects. We need them being sold on stock exchange because this is a product that is actually ready and the demand is there. The third area that we really need to do, and this is what UNDP globally and also will be doing here in Nigeria, is ensuring that we have the right incentives in place through policy system, for example. Let me just discuss briefly the carbon markets, which has huge opportunities to support the investments in this area. And we are very, very glad that from the last COP29 discussions, finally, there was agreement on one of the articles, Article 6, that can be able to allow Nigeria to do a bilateral agreement with another country, whereby the country will invest in Nigeria so that Nigeria can build the capacity to build up the carbon and immediately get the resources. So it can be able to facilitate smooth flow of climate carbon finance to be able to get some of these investments going. So strengthening the country's carbon market systems, having proper frameworks on carbon markets. The UNDP has been working with the government to put in place the Article 6 framework. We are also currently supporting Nigeria to prepare its biannual transparency report, which is, as he mentioned, or mentioned earlier, you need a very clear baseline as a country. This is where we are. So whoever helps us to reach here can be able to effectively get these carbon markets and actually use them to report on the obligations in the carbon market. So ensuring that we have the right policy and regulatory climate and also the systems for tracking, measuring the greenhouse gases that are being introduced or removed from the system will immediately be able to unlock opportunities for flow of carbon finance into the country, which will get some of the investors, some in this room, opportunities to even increase investment in those opportunities. So these are some of the opportunities that we see from UNDP's perspective. If we can be able to support countries to effectively build their capacities around these areas, then we can move this conversation to the clean tech investment era in Africa. And immediately then we'll be very attractive to the investors that are out there that are always looking for these opportunities to invest.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for that. I'll come to Wangari now. Geoffrey really emphasized on clean tech, right? To see how we can leverage that and harness, the energy sources that we need and then energy penetration here in the country. But I would like to know from you, how do you suggest that we develop an enabling environment to then attract this level of investment that we need in the country? How has Kenya also been able to achieve this? Because again, you have a lot going on.
Yes, I need to be diplomatic as I say this. I don't know if we knew what we were doing at the beginning. I don't know if my brother can agree. It's not, I think some of it happened by accident in terms of there was a need for power. Kenya doesn't have oil. And because we don't have oil, we had to find another solution. And geothermal came up and other renewables came up and now it's working in our favor, which is fantastic. And then all the policies and stuff like that have come later. The Electricity Act, which was developed in 2019, also was very robust, but it's only come recently. We've been developing geothermal for many decades. So in terms of the enabling environment, there's some things that are by accident, and there's some things that have happened as a result of, us tasting how sweet renewables have been for Kenya. I think one of the big things, and I think you touched on this, is the policy environment. If you tell investors that you have a tax break of this long when you come here, all you have to do is produce this much or develop this many solar panels and employ this many people. Slowly, people start to look at it as an interesting market. When I talk to my members who are OEMs, who are developers, and I tell them about Nigeria, many of them are saying, no, we can't go there. Why? Because there's no clear policy that says, only until the Electricity Act that came up recently, but there's no clear policy that says your investment will be safe. So if with NREC, we've brought people from the UK, we've brought investors from Dubai, we've brought investors from China. Rise Energy has said they want to come and manufacture in Nigeria. They're actively looking for an opportunity to come and manufacture small wind turbines in Nigeria. But there's not enough support in terms of tax breaks, policy support to enable them to do that. So they keep coming in and out, looking for the opportunity. They will sign PPAs, but what they really want to do is manufacture here in Nigeria. If you think of the raw material that you have in terms of lithium, there's a lot of lithium in Nigeria. One of the biggest things is demand for batteries right now. Why can't we tell people, instead of taking raw material straight out of Nigeria, let's produce even to 6% battery grade lithium? And there's a company called Re-Element that also wanted to come and do value addition to raw lithium ore to create, add 6% valuation addition before it goes to China. They came, they tried to look, they're now going to Ghana, right? Why are we losing that? Because again, the policy environment is not there. So we do need to start to shape our policies to really attract that vision. The second thing is, we also need to be smart on our end of and I say our, because now I'm your adopted sister, but on our end of the bargain, we need to know that we can no longer start signing foreign forex-denominated contracts. It's never worked in our favor. And so now that we know that the Naira can devalue as much as it did, let's say, last year, then we can't continue doing this, right? So if we say that if you're going to sell power to us, sell it to us in Naira, we will collect the money in Naira, and that will enable us to pay. You figure out the risk. And we also need to start to engage our own local financiers. If the banks, I see AFDB in the corner there, but if the banks don't want to give us money in our own currencies, then let's go to our pension funds. Let's go to our local investors. Let's go to our high net worth individuals who have Naira. Let's go to them and say, okay, please, can you come and invest in this? And unfortunately, I don't think we're really engaging those new areas or those new pockets of money that could really be beneficial within this sector, especially de-risking the beginning of project development. So in terms of that, I think that's the two things I'm seeing. I think the workforce is a big one. We've already touched enough on that, so I won't go there. I think maybe let me leave it at that for now.
All right, thank you. But would you say that, maybe I'll come to Jumoke with the question following what Wangari has said, especially when it comes to investors signing contracts that are Naira denominated now and not dollar denominated, because I see some conversations around the interests, for example, or the profit margin that is expected at the end of the project or its implementation is then sort of reduced when they need to convert to dollars, because again they spend Naira, outside Nigeria, right? But how would you say that it would really impact on the scale and level of volume of investments that we would see coming into the country in its actual sense?
So this question about denominating loans in Naira is a big question, and it's a very important question, even across the power sector value chain. Issues about even pricing of gas in Naira is a discussion that is ongoing. It's a never-ending discussion. Recently, the sale of, crude to Dangote refineries was in Naira and to local and the other local refineries, because it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch if your financing is in foreign currency and your receipts are in local currency. In fact, when you look at the process of privatization, a lot of the acquisition facilities were in foreign currency. And with the devaluation, many of those loans went bad and resulted in some of the discos being taken over. So it's a real conversation that I know even companies like InfraCredits are looking at. How can we find a solution? Because it's a real problem. If you are not able to control the macroeconomic indices that result in the foreign currency fluctuations, then it's a real problem. And you find yourself, you are owing 1 million today, tomorrow you are owing 10. And totally wipes out the business. So that conversation about finding local currency financing is important. I like the discussion about pension funds because there's a huge amount of money in Naira, in pension funds. But of course, pension funds also have very strict rules of what they can invest in. So how can you de-risk those projects, to the point where a pension fund is willing? So we need to sit down and have these conversations. There needs to be a cohesion between, do we really want investors to come in, whether local or foreign? And even if your pension funds begin to invest in your projects and those projects are delivered, I think it would attract even the foreign investors to come in.
Yes, yeah. And I would say, just add in terms of de-risking this, and you're right, you need a very specific instrument for a pension fund to invest. But there's green bonds. I think you spoke about green bonds earlier. We can structure green bonds, and if you're able to show projects that have local financing from pension funds early on, the risk that somebody will come and take on a loan they'll give you at the beginning of the development of a project versus the middle, the risk that they put on the project will be much less because you've already had the initial de-risk. It's already stabilized by your local big boys, the big players, right? And it's the same conversation we're having even in Kenya, right? Because there's a lot of money in pension funds. The technology now is mature. They're investing in other types of infrastructure. Why can't renewable energy be part of that mix as well? So if we can also, I don't know if the finance people are in the room, but if we have green bonds and other instruments that can enable pension funds to really invest, it's really the way to go.
Yeah, I think and Development Bank of Nigeria has a couple things that they've reeled out of recent in this regard. But as we sort of wrap up, thank you so much for your time and the conversation. But I would like to get your final thoughts on a way forward, really. At least we have agreed during this conversation that we cannot isolate climate action and then energy access and energy transition, right? They all have to work hand in hand, and we need to find a way to find that bridge, really. So I'll come back to you, Jeffrey. What are your final thoughts before we call this a day?
Yeah, but as I sit back and look at all the initiatives that have been happening in Africa and in Nigeria, I'm very optimistic. I think, particularly in Nigeria, there's a lot of awareness right now, and everybody knows the problem, and everybody seems to know the solution, from the policymakers to even the common Uber driver knows where the problem is. And I think everybody's trying to realize in Africa that it's time we really refocus on energy. And energy is going to be very, very central in the next decade. And I think we'll be able to crack and resolve some of these challenges that have been there. But I think even as we reflect on how best to do it, let me emphasize on the importance of the area of coordination. There are too many small initiatives all over the place. Everyone is coming up with a new initiative in this corner. There's a new one. Everyone is trying. It's like a marketplace of churches. You can imagine if you have too many churches at the same place, even Jesus himself would run away from that place. I don't think they're even preaching my gospel very well. So there's a very critical opportunity for Nigeria to strengthen its coordination of the energy and climate space. I think we have a very good tool that we've been using, and we are very happy that the Nigerian government is going to be using it a lot more, the Integrated National Financing Framework. It's a very, very useful tool, and we are working right now. The next phase of the Integrated National Financing Framework has prioritized climate and energy as one of the sectors where there will be a conversation on how we can be able to effectively get everybody on the table to know what you are doing and how it's actually responding to our needs in this space. And this includes also public spending. The states will also need to look at the budgets, the federal will need to look at the budgets, the private sector will be brought to the table, the partners, so that we can be able to start the whole process of coordination. I think it's going to be quite critical. Secondly, I believe that the current policy and regulatory frameworks that are coming in are very, very, very transformative. The Electricity Act 2023 is really, really, really very, very transformative. It just needs to be structured really well and really, really supported on the implementation. The states need to be ready, for example, to start negotiating contracts within their region, because some of them have been using the same infrastructure. It will not make sense to start establishing new infrastructure when you have been benefiting from the same GenCo, because you have 28 GenCos, 12 DISCos that now need to find a way of responding to 36 states. So these conversations need to quickly evolve and morph into agreements that can be able to effectively resolve some of the challenges that are happening. But I believe that Nigeria's energy security lies in increasing drastically its renewables in the energy mix, as well as also really resolving the transmission challenges. Because as you increase generation capabilities, you also need to quickly deal with the challenges Chimoke has mentioned on the transmission system. How can we quickly be able to come up with a transmission system that is 21st century grade? Because some of the systems we still have, to be very honest, we inherited from the colonial period. I think those are very, very critical. You resolve that, I think the system will quickly be able to move. The clean tech revolution has already taken off. It's just being televised as we watch. I don't think it will go back. The best solution is to adopt it and to see how we can be able to facilitate it to grow to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for that. Okay.
Okay, so I actually believe in the small initiatives, and I don't believe Jesus would run away from the small initiatives. Because you do not despise the days of small beginnings. Now, some of these small beginnings are projects that you may need to do a proof of concept. You may not want to take on something that is so big, and at the end of the day, you find yourself in a mess. By the time you've done one or two, small projects and learned the lessons along the way, it's easier to scale. So those initiatives, if that's a small initiative is what you can handle right now, by all means. Now we have 36 states. Yes, some of the donors agencies, including UKNAF, are working with the state electricity markets to do quite a bit of standardization, while recognizing the unique opportunities that each state possesses. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing is, this energy transition means different things to different people. So depends on where you are on the scale. So some people define their own energy transition as zero carbon, some people low carbon, some people net zero. So there are all these different definitions of what an energy transition is. And you need to really develop, your own definition of energy transition while trying to invest sustainably. So Nigeria, we talked about the 40-something, you mentioned 60 gigawatts of generating sets, parts available. Okay, fine. So how about moving those generating sets to gas, for example? That is in itself an energy transition. And the former vice president, I know, made a lot of inputs into the recognition of gas as a transition fuel. So it's important that we recognize that even as we are working not just towards energy transition, but towards energy security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Wangari.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with both my panelists. Thank you for your comments. When I think of energy in Nigeria, I think when we're here, we think of energy the opposite way that people think about it. So if you want stable power, you think I need to have a generator, then you think solar, then you think the grid at last resort, right? We need to think of it the opposite way, right? And I'll swap solar and grid there because, of course, we still know that we need a lot of investment on the grid. But if we change our mindset to say, let's think solar, then the grid, then generators, it's both going to be better for the environment, but also for our pockets. We don't realize that the way we think of it currently means that we're paying for the most expensive electricity first, right? All of us have generators in our houses. In fact, I have a host, I'm staying with my friend, and the first thing that they said is they put solar, their generator's gone because their solar is enough for their house, and they're shocked. They're shocked that solar can actually power their house. So the more of us that start to discover renewables first, then the grid, as the grid works through the challenges that we have, and one of the models of getting a robust grid is maybe introducing private sector players, IPTs as we call them, independent power transmitters. Then you slowly start to build a really innovative way of thinking about energy in Nigeria. But we have to flip that on its head, and it's not going to be easy because it's so ingrained in us and how we think of power here. But yeah, if we start to flip that on its head, innovate around it, innovate around finance, the way we've innovated around the Electricity Act, I think there's a lot that will come from that.
Thank you so much to all my panelists for such insightful conversations. I think they do deserve a round of applause before the questions. Thank you very much. So I'll come to the audience. I already see 4 hands, 5. Okay, so I need to give you numbers now so that it's coordinated. So you're first. Well, I saw your hands next, but I'll just mention the woman. So I do a man and a woman depending on who so yes, you are first, you're second, third. Is there another lady who is going to take fourth? Okay, I'm coming to you. The gentleman in glasses, yeah. So you are fourth, you're fifth, you're sixth. Is there anyone else I'm missing? Oh, seventh, yes. So please, is there any? Thank you very much. So we'll just do first 3 and then they would respond and we'll come to the others.
Thank you very much, the panelists. You have said a lot, and it is very fantastic and educative discussions. I just have some small
you can introduce
observation. Okay. My name is Engineer Gaddaf Sani Shehu, the Deputy Managing Director, Kano Hydro and the Energy Development Company. So we in Kano, we have never attracted an investment so far in renewable energy integration, but we have received a lot of proposals and an agreement, maybe power purchase agreement. So I would like to ask, normally this agreement comes like 2 clauses, which are very complicated and difficult. For me, I didn't know. Maybe the house can share their experience. In the agreement, one of the key clauses they demanded is pay or take agreement. Take or pay agreement. 1, I couldn't. 2, after I sign, I agree with take or pay. You just come with also bank guarantee. So what are these 2? How is this? There is no conflict. I would like to know more about these 2 critical issues, because we have never attracted an investment because of these 2 issues. So how do you go about it as a government officials? Okay,
so this is how we're going to do it. So I would hand down your question to Jumoke. So I'll just be giving so that each panelist responds to at least one question, and then we save time.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Engineer Shehu. So the take or pay clause is very standard. Actually, it's one of the major clauses that without agreeing it, there's no going forward. So I'm not surprised that, so the take or pay means that it's let me just give you a background. So for somebody to be able to generate power, they must have put in an investment. They must have built a plant. They must have people who are supplying them, depending on what is the energy source. It may be gas. So all those things have a cost. And maybe they're going to generate maybe 50 megawatts or 10, or let's say 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts. Okay. Now, they want to know you are the off-taker, the person that is going to be buying the power from them. So because once the plant is put in place, those costs are sunk. Then there is the running cost there are the fixed costs for having that 1 or 2 megawatt plant in place. And there are the other costs that are not fixed costs. The take or pay says that for these 2 megawatts I'm generating for you, this particular portion of it, once it is available, whether you take it, you don't take it, you must pay. Okay. The bank guarantee is a fallback. It's like a fallback position. What if you don't pay me? I know, when people are coming into agreement, they will promise you everything. Anything you want, they will do it. But you want something more than that promise. That yes, you have promised me. Engineer Shehu, you are a good man. I know you can't fail. What if Engineer Shehu is not there tomorrow? So the bank guarantee is a promise by a bank that if Engineer Shehu does not pay me, the bank will pay me. So they work together. They are not conflicting clauses. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Who was the second? The lady? Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Very quickly, please. Please try to explain to him as well.
Yes. So if you are signing a power purchase agreement and you are signing a 2 megawatt power purchase agreement and there is a take or pay component, what guided you to choosing 2 megawatt? If you have an energy demand for 2 megawatt, then the take or pay shouldn't be an issue. The issue around take or pay is when you don't need 2 megawatt, maybe you need 1 megawatt, and they are coming in with their financing, and that has to be backed by a guarantee and is based on that take or pay. So that is when you will be exposed to that. But once your demand is above or just the same as 2 megawatt, I think the take or pay factor shouldn't be an issue for you.
Okay, maybe because of time, you can always engage in the conversation after the session. So I will just go to the next question now.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I still remain
One
my own
house,
self.
thank you.
Engineer Seriki from Rural
One house, please. Thank
from
you.
Rural Electrification Agency. Now, Mrs. Jumokai made mention of for cost and affordability, which I think that is the aspect we're supposed to look at. If you look at the nation where we are now, investing huge amount of money. For now, we should look at what is affordable. And thank God that the electricity has been decentralized. There's a lot of new transition energy. We have a lot that is yet on tap. The biomass is there. We have a lot of grains. We have a lot of waste that we can use. The state should look at what they can afford, not the mega, and that can still give us back. Then when we are going to huge amount of this project, I said it yesterday, that we should try in this kind of symposium, we need to gather students. Let students be part of it. Let lecturers be part of it. Let them take it back to because what is causing a lot of sustainability is because we initiate projects, there's nobody to follow it up. It will crash down, and at the end of the day, the mega amount of money used in investing a project is lying down, fallow, nobody to recuperate it back. So students should be part of it. Then let's look out of the box. What are the other sources of renewable energy that is also clean? Because what we are looking at is not to deplete the ozone layer and to be in line with others. There are lots. I'm not waiving this. These are good. In fact, the lecture is so fantastic. I love it. But at the same time, they normally said in my language that you look at your pocket before buying things. So let's check what are we capable of for now. We get there. It's not a rush, but let us be steady in getting to that climate Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jeffrey, do you want to just touch on what she said, given that he talked a lot about clean tech? Yeah, I know it's a comment, but I mean, I think she's also sort of emphasizing on sustainability. And while we talk about these things, people that can go back and start to think about solutions, preferring solutions, and then recommending to those that can.
Yes, I agree with you entirely. And when you mentioned biomass, I remembered another area that we haven't spoken of today, the area of clean cooking. Over 180 million Nigerians don't have access to clean cooking, and estimates suggest that close to 95,000 are dying in a year because of indoor air pollution and all those challenges. And biomass, is at the center of that. It's also somehow also continuing to perpetuate the deforestation and land degradation challenges, which are making the climate situation even worse.
Right.
And so we also need to quickly galvanize around a clean cooking solutions, because the technologies are there. And we agree that, for example, you mentioned, we consider LPG an important transitional resource. States like Lagos, Bayelsa, really managed to make a lot of movement towards LPG. So those are the conversations, and I agree with you. Some of these small steps, Madam Chimoke, can start from the kitchens. But if we get all the kitchens to be changed, then we can quickly also have contributed to improvement. So I just want to agree with your comment.
Thank you very much. Third question.
Good afternoon. My name is Engineer Sanubala Ilyasu Dambata, Managing Director, Kano State Rural Electricity Board. Mine is, the topic is about the climate and energy security. So for us to achieve energy security, definitely that energy has to be accessible, has to be available, has to be affordable, at the same time, acceptability of that energy. So, and the Nigerian practice is we are looking at the national grid, and that national grid is the grid that connects all the state, even some, some countries that are neighboring with us. We are dependent on that national grid. One of the panelists made mention of, let us start somewhere. And everybody here in this hall has a contribution that he's supposed to give for that campaigning of achieving energy security. Mine is not a question, but it's like sharing of more light of how to attain that energy security. For example, Electricity Act 2023 now is like come at the right time that, come at the right time. For us to decentralize a national grid, I think it's a good way, or it's a good way for achieving this energy transition. For example, in the Kano State, Jigawa, and Katsina, it's like we are at the extreme of the national grid, and we don't have any generation station that are feeding to the national grid in our own end. So, if Kano itself decide to achieve that energy security, like what you are campaigning now, we have abundance of renewable resource that combat to attain that energy security in our state.
Right.
Solar, this wind, at the same time, small hydros. Kano State already have the established two, no, not mini grid, 2 hydros, one with capacity of 10 megawatt, the other one with 6 megawatt. And those areas within that 10 megawatt hydro power plant bid test and said that area is already, their energy is 99% secured. Because even with this, with the experience we have in the couple of months back, that area is already is constantly having electricity 247. So with this kind of the project, a state can develop such a project that can, at least if the Kano state cover some area to achieve that energy security, maybe we can expand it bit by bit, so that if my state turn that energy security, maybe the next state can copy or can adopt something similar to that in order to achieve the energy security. That is my contribution.
Thank you very much. The next question, I think the okay, yes.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I believe mine is more of a contribution / the potential of us creating this 2-day training into a community of like minds. Currently, with everything that's been said today. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Oscar Ibokwe from Buzda and Company. As I was saying, sorry about that. We were into installations of substations, 132/32 kV substations. I've handled several World Bank projects, and also we're currently doing vocational skill trainings within the renewable energy, particularly solar. We've done several different contracts for people like internally displaced and migrants and refugees, and several other parastatals within Nigeria. So I've been in the renewable business for about 3 years, but in transmissions, installation and commissioning for about 10, and general contract work for 30 years. But what I am noticing here is that we need to create a community, because from everything that's being said, in Nigeria, in Africa, wind and solar is still in a development stage. So how do we create this 2-day training into a small community of networking, so that I can share information with my friends from Kenya, I can share people with Kanu from all over, and have it like a place where we can create possible JVs, possible consortiums, possible partnerships, foreign partnerships, or even consultancies for private sector people like myself who are interested in becoming distributors within the electricity, renewable electricity within Nigeria and beyond. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next person is on your table. Thank you. Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dauda Adamu. I'm the CEO of Girama Turnstile Limited. And I have a special interest in decentralized financing. I have listened to the people who have been making presentation at the high table, and I have realized one of the biggest challenges that we have in Africa, because based on my own understanding of what is going on in the renewable energy, Africa is flooded with ideas, and as well as there are many viable funding arrangements that can actually fund some of these projects. But the biggest issue, which in many cases we keep shying away from, is the issue of corruption and the weak institution that we have. And because of these two things, more often than not, you find someone with brilliant idea and then the other person with available funding, but the challenge is the bankability of that particular project. And so more often than not, I rather hold my money back than put it, in an idea that I know at the end of the day, it may not necessarily guarantee safety, return or safe return in my investment, or like we talk about the issue of what do you call it, law and related issues. in signing some of these contracts, you'll find out that at the end of the day, this missing link tends to push investors away from putting their money in some of this. So is there a better way where decentralized financing can take the front burner of making sure that, for instance, there's something they call tokenization. And it's an arrangement, basically, is an alternative financing source where the buyer and the seller come together and come up with an agreement where money is not going to exchange hand. Rather, they invest into what you call a token. And then that token is what you will use. You buy like an interest or like a stake in that token. And then as the project proceeds, your investment is also determined by the amount of token you're able to hold in that investment. So I'm just bringing something that the forum can actually begin to look into. There's the issue of what do you call it? Sorry, the word keeps going on my mind. Anyway, but basically my point has to do with decentralized financing as an alternative for solving some of these our problem of the issue of bankability, corruption, and weak institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, some people had. I think there was somebody here. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, panelists, my regards to the whole sitting. My name is Ponzin Gamde, the MD CEO Plateau State Energy Corporation. This event is very important to us when the invitation came, because I saw the item win. We have been the solar aspect of the renewable energy has been sort of very well patronized, but in Nigeria we have not seen. Maybe in my own part of the state. In fact, even when in engagements like this, I've not seen people who have come up with interest to develop wind energy in Nigeria. And we, as a state, have a lot of that potential. We have solar, we have hydro, we have Nigeria. Plateau has developed some part of it as since 100 years ago. That is NESCO. Everybody knows NESCO Nigeria Power Company. That's hydro power. Then the renewable as solar has been also currently being developed across the states. And some are still coming. But wind, we have not had any interest. Is it that we do not have the experts? I've gone to an engagement. I met someone who came from Dubai. We discussed, but he never showed up. I didn't see him. So I do not know if there are wind energy developers in this hall, and or if not, why have we not had? Because we had it all. We have it only in Katsina in Nigeria. So what's happening? Where are the wind developers? Is it too costly to develop? Or what's the problem with the wind developers?
All right, thank you very much. We're running out of time, so I'd like to give others just 1 minute for your questions or your contributions, and so we'll wrap this session up.
Thank you. My name is Ruben Okoye. I'm from Enugu State, and I have two. One is a request and the other is a question. The request is to my sister Jumoke. So the national IRP will be interested in getting access to that document. It will help us a lot. So please, we can take this offline. Now the question is, I understand the internal struggle between energy transition and energy security, especially in Enugu State. Our policy provides that within a particular period of time, the petrol and diesel generators should be phased out because of the issues, the public health issues, and the rest of that. All right. And now, the policy expects that we use all our resources that are available to us. And in Enugu, we have some of the best coal in the world to generate power. So, why can't we use coal? Now, in Europe and America, they are still using their coal. South Africa is using coal. When the issue in Ukraine came up, Germany resuscitated their coal power plants. So why is it that we will sit on coal? I don't need to tell you that almost the city of Enugu is sitting on coal. And this is very big, very fine coal, that is better than what you have in South Africa. So why, in the spirit of energy security, which should not be opposed to energy transition, why can't I have coal power plants that meet basic environment? I don't mean the basic in a bad way, but meet necessary environmental requirements.
Thank you very much for your question. Do you also have a question or a contribution? Okay. You be the last person because we're out of time completely.
Thank you. I think sometimes having lunch, after lunch and you come to this kind of thing, you're struggling to be awake. But I believe I got most of the important things you said, but I've struggled to be awake. My name is Solochukulobe from Anambra. Like most other states, we are trying to create our own electricity market. And I think we've done the IRP, we've done the policy, and the bill hopefully will come out, will be passed before the end of this year. And then we'll start the process of setting up that market. There are people here I think I would like to have a conversation with to see how they can help us. But I'm trying to step back from all of this and ask myself, I don't understand the electricity market. It's very complex. I don't think my level of learning gets to that as an economist. I'm just beginning to pick a few things as I go along. But I'm beginning to wonder whether we are fragmenting this market so badly that the process putting them back together at some point. I'm just reflecting, I was in the UK when they privatized the market. And essentially you have the Gencos, you have the national grid, and then you have the retail, the distributors. And that's what has been maintained. And the Gencos, we're talking about solar, windmill, and the rest of that. But that responsibility of generating enough power still lies with the generating companies, whether it's investing in even nuclear energy and the kind of thing. I think there is a policy in some of these developed countries that nuclear will constitute about 20% of the energy mix. But there is one integrated, if you like, market. The generating companies. I remember in those days, there was the Empire, there was the Scottish Power, and the rest of that. But they generated power for the country. And then the national grid ensured that it's transmitted, and then the suppliers will meet with the generators and establish the electricity market. What I see today in my country is beginning to worry me. That there seems to be so much fragmentation. And in the end, everything will come back to the national grid. Because the distribution companies? Are they going to build their own transmission line or distribution line? No. So for a very long time to come, we'll be stuck with the structure that we had, the privatization that took place in Nigeria. But it seems to me that because of lack of investment in some critical areas, the generating company and the distribution, and then we created this new arrangement. We're all going to play to that. But I'm just wondering, we don't have very high-level policymakers here that will begin to take a step back and think through, where are the problems? Is the problem having sufficient investors coming in to put money where we have the infrastructure deficit, or what? So I'm just trying to put it back to all of you that are guiding the country. UNDP, I'm happy. Indeed, you are doing quite a lot in Anambra. And I'm going to come back to you to see how you help us build our own market within this evolving, fragmented market.
Thank you very much.
This is what we have, but as a member of government, I'll have to make it work effectively for the state, for my own state. But as a Nigerian, I'm beginning to feel maybe we should all step back and see how do we structure. And then I'm just beginning to understand electricity is very complex. It's not like producing toilet roll and selling it or water.
Thank you
it's
very
a
much.
very complex sector. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your input and question as well. For the question on wind, I think I'll just advise, because of time, that after this session or after today's session, you speak with Wangari. She's about the best person to respond to the question. Is there anyone on the panel that wants to quickly compress the two questions about coal in Enugu? In 1 minute, I don't know how you're going to respond to that in 1 minute, but we are totally out of time.
We can also take the conversation offline.
Yes,
but
so just
the long and short answer is, is there anybody who will finance the coal projects now? Will you find that financing even locally or internationally? I think that is a good way to.
All right, thank you so much to all our panelists. And just a bit of a wrap up on all that was discussed today. Policies in themselves can't be enforced by themselves. That was from Jumoke. Exploring green industrialization was Wangari. Develop state electricity markets. Policy dialogue coherence is very important. That was Geoffrey. One house, please. Human capital development, everybody agreed to that on the panel. Sanctity of contracts, very important. Local currency financing, that was Wangari also advising, and then we having to go back and think through how we can actualize this. Then decentralized financing, also important. Coordination of the Nigerian energy and climate space is also important. Then converting ideas into bankable investments. Thank you so much to all our panelists for this session and all of your contributions. Please, a round of applause for all of them. Thank